night, if not a desperately cold night. So welcome to this evening's Health and Wellbeing Committee of Worcester City Council. And I have official introduction to read out. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking, including the chair. Thank you, Julian. So first of all, appointment of substitutes. I think we have some. One.
Yes, Chair. We do have two substitutes tonight. Matt Lamb is here for Richard Udo, and Andy Roberts is here for Lucy Hodgson.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest on any matters on the agenda? No, thank you. Public participation? I can't see outside public, no. So that takes us to the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 30th of January. I personally wasn't there, but I know other committee members have. Yes, Steve?
Yeah, there's a correction, which is, but it was Louis Stephen that was deputising for Tom.
I did wonder when I read it.
Is that right? Because Louis is on the committee.
But both Councillor Cockerham and Councillor Piotrowski are on the committee.
Right, I see.
It was Louis. He briefed me up.
So it was
Louis Stephen.
Louis Stephen was substitute for Tom. Yeah.
So shall I correct that on here? Thank you. Any other corrections or amendments that anybody wants to make? On that basis, happy to accept them as a true record of the last meeting. Okay, thank you. I will sign those on your say-so. Thank you, which moves us on to Rough Sleeper Outreach. And welcome to Mel Kirk, Chief Executive of MAG's Day Centre, and David Hopkins, Senior SWEP Coordinator from CCP. You're going to remind us what that stands for, I hope, for those of us that forget the precise acronym. Thank you very much for coming. You know, rough sleeping is part of the remit of this council. And I think, you know, as we're getting towards the end of winter, it's useful to reflect and understand how that's working. So not too scary. So if you tell us a bit about, you know, what the last few months have been like for yourselves, and then opportunity for members of the committee to ask some questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
I should have a slideshow available. Thank you very much. If it fails, I do have notes. So I thought I'd give you the most headline figure in relation to successes. So on the 10th of the 3rd, 23, 4 rough sleepers were accommodated in one day in Worcester City. 2 of those were actually very visible on the high street. You may have seen a couple that have been on the high street. So 2 of those 4 people were actually accommodated. Next slide, please. I now have to wear my glasses. Overview of rough sleeping in Worcester City. So this is just a snapshot for you. On Friday, there were 13 rough sleepers in Worcester City. Most rough sleepers have very complex needs, including substance misuse, alcohol addiction, mental health. And there has been a significant issue with people with mental health issues. And this is one of the barriers that we have found is that people finding accommodation. There are various factors that need to be addressed before a person is ready to move into accommodation. As this is the Health and Wellbeing Board, you understand precisely that there are a lot of factors that people need to address, such as self-confidence, self-worth, before they're in a position then to move into accommodation. It's not just as simple as finding a person as a home, as has been demonstrated in the National Homeless First initiative. Housing first, sorry. So next slide, please. Challenges to accommodate rough sleepers. There are various challenges. As I said, it's not just about finding a person a home. And some of the challenges that we find to accommodate rough sleepers are engagement. So people find it really difficult to build up trust, whether it's real or perceived. People find that organisations have failed them in the past, and that provides a significant barrier. Sporadic engagement. So most organisations need continued engagement for them to continue with that service. A lot of our guys are very, very chaotic, so continued engagement is very difficult for them, so they get dropped out of services. Access to accommodation. There are so many issues at gaining access to accommodation. So unable to maintain a tenancy, criminal convictions, such as ASB. Then we have no local connection, no recourse to public funds, and also exhausting all accommodation options available in Worcester. Worcester is quite a small city, so there is less accommodation options available, say, compared to Birmingham. People who have dogs. A lot of accommodation does not want to provide accommodation for dogs, and rough sleepers are unwilling to surrender their dog because that has been their companion that they can trust for so long that they're not willing to surrender their dogs. Couples. I did say that we had accommodated a couple, but it is usually very, very difficult. Most homeless offers offer single people. And if you're in a couple, you don't want to lose your partner. And so people will choose to remain on the streets rather than go into accommodation on their own. Lack of continued support once in accommodation. As I've said before, it's not just about providing a home. People need to develop the skills to maintain that home, and then, especially with entrenched rough sleepers, so it takes time before they have the confidence to be able to maintain it. However, there are a few initiatives in the pipeline. We will discuss this later. Next slide, please. Oh, you've done it already. Thank you. You're preempting me. Yes, the role of outreach. I like to give our teams a mission, and the mission for outreach is simply to engage the unengaged. So they're there for anybody who is currently not engaging with services, but we also continue to work with them afterwards. Since January, outreach have worked with 22 rough sleepers, the majority of which are entrenched. Their aim is to build up the trust and then work towards addressing their needs and then finding accommodation. The first two stages are the hardest ones to do. We are not a time-limited service, as everybody is different and everybody's needs are completely different. So it might take, say, this side of the room 2 days before they're ready to go into accommodation. And I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on this side of the room next. It might take you years, but that's okay, because we go at the person's pace. However, moving people into accommodation can be quite challenging. ITT, next slide please. So this started a year ago, and they differ slightly to the outreach team. The ITT team are currently working with 26 individuals, and they give them very intensive support, and they have multiple complex issues. One is rough sleeping, 24 are in accommodation, that's both temporary accommodation or more long-term accommodation, and 2 are currently in prison. We still provide support when they're in prison. The team have supported 2 people into temporary accommodation and a further 7 into permanent accommodation between January and February. So you can see our teams are quite successful. The team has also established very good connections utilising a multi-agency ethos with external agencies. We can't achieve anything on our own. There has to be multi-agency working. Next slide, please. How ITT differs from outreach. So I said there was a slight difference, so now I'll explain. Outreach work with a person until they find accommodation. ITT work with a person across their entire journey. The aim of the ITT was to develop this new way of working with people, because the traditional method is we start here, one agency works with the person, then they get to the next stage in their journey, and then they're passed on to another agency. But it's a bit like a relay race. You know, when you pass that baton on, there's the danger it gets dropped. So this is what it's trying to address, and to ensure that person has a consistent person, also doesn't have to keep developing trust with different agencies. They will work with somebody until they are able to sustain a tenancy independently. Then they will withdraw their services. However, if, say, somebody has a slight hiccup, as we like to call them, then they will rocket back in. Those hiccups might be that they're about to be faced with eviction, and they will work with them to address those issues and try and sustain that tenancy for them. Next slide, please. Partnership working. As I said, it's very important to work in partnership. This includes working with the local authority. The teams will accompany people to appointments to ensure that they go to those appointments. And one of the other things we do is remind them of their appointments, because rough sleepers, as I said, are very chaotic, so they forget. We're there to remind them, and we are on the phone constantly reminding them, and we'll go to where they are to ensure that they go to those appointments. So, for example, it's really important that you go to your probation appointments. If you don't, you get breached, and then you go back to prison. And although we do work with people in prison, it's very, very difficult to provide that support when they're in prison. Workers arrange multi-agency meetings to ensure the effective collaboration. Collaborative plans can be developed utilising person-centred principles. It's all about the person. We put the person first. It's all about their individual needs and working with them at their own pace. We also advocate on their behalf as well. Sometimes people find it difficult to communicate with other organisations, and sometimes they get quite frustrated, and if they're frustrated, then they usually drop from services if they're being angry. And they can work with accommodation providers, and some accommodation providers are quite reluctant to accommodate people due to their past experience. So they can work and develop a very effective action plan to ensure that that provider feels confident enough to offer them a placement. Next slide, please. It's a case study. I'm sorry, it's very small to see on the screen. So I'll go through this. This is a person that all agencies said You're never going to accommodate him. Yes, we did. D spent most of his younger years moving around foster care placements. He developed substance addiction. This was funded by criminal behaviour, and he had 38 convictions. He had multiple medical issues and addicted to alcohol. So his issues were alcohol, violence, self-harm, drinking till he's unconscious, and blackouts. So there's quite a lot of needs there. He has been working with his probation officer and previously IOM for over 5 years, and has been recalled to prison on numerous occasions. He had worked sporadically with Cranston since 2015 and been housed several times, but unable to maintain that tenancy. And this was a result of his mental health and lack of engagement. We talked about this earlier. He also found it very difficult to manage his finances and was also recalled quite a number of times for breaching his CBO. Apologies, please forget that that name was there, okay? He had been prolific rough sleeper since 1998. We're in 2023 now. So this is quite a long time that this person has been known. We started working with him in April 22. In June, he went to prison for breaching his CBO, but we maintained contact. Upon release, he regularly attended MAGs for support, which is something he never has done before. He was referred to for a property which was successful. However, in November 22, the property was broken into and he fled and would not return because he was scared for his safety, and he chose to rough sleep. We continued to support him and secured temporary accommodation whilst he was considered for a property. The property became available in March, and he has now moved in. He maintained contact with us and maintained to remain out of custody, which was his longest time out of prison ever. He has now moved in and is maintaining his tenancy and his property to a high standard. He's very good at cleaning. I wish he was my cleaner, actually, because how clean he is. And which is something that most professionals thought he would never be able to achieve. So these are the positive things that both our outreach and ITT can achieve when given sufficient time to work with individuals. Next slide, please. And it is the final slide. New initiatives. There are various new initiatives in the pipeline that I thought I'd highlight to you. Some of them you might be aware of already. There's the SHAP funding. This is currently being scoped. The funding will provide supported accommodation to rough sleepers in collaboration with registered social landlords. We've already highlighted some of the gaps, such as couples and people with dogs. There is an outreach mental health nurse, which is funded through OHID via Cranston, and they'll work with people who have both mental health and substance misuse issues, which is something we've needed for years. And it is so welcome that this funding has been provided. And we have also been awarded a grant very specifically. I don't know how we'll spend the 29 pence of 1329 for 2023-24 to provide bespoke funding that will be used to support people to move into accommodation. This can also include deposits, because a lot of rough sleepers don't have savings, so it's one of the biggest barriers to finding people accommodation is the deposits. The other ongoing initiative is SWEP. That doesn't mean getting your broom out. SWEP is the Severe Weather Emergency Provision, which includes hot and cold SWEP. Hot SWEP happens when the weather is over 30 degrees and we go out and we provide water, sun hats, sun cream, and staying safe advice. There is also cold SWEP. David, it's over to you.
So obviously cold SWEP is winter SWEP, and that runs from the 1st of October all the way to the 31st of March. And And the protocol is obviously from the government, and the protocol is that if the weather gets down to 0 degrees on 3 consecutive days, SWEP will be called. However, Worcestershire, in their wisdom, and I like that wisdom, decided that they wanted to call SWEP if it's 0 degrees on the first day. So SWEP will get called in Worcestershire when any of the districts are predicted by the Met Office to be 0 degrees or below. And then the whole of Worcestershire goes into SWEP, and obviously we then have to take that around and send that out. So how we get that message out is there will be an email go out with a SWEP activation form with referral forms on it usually, and that goes for a list of, there's probably 120 people on our list. It could even be more. However, it then also gets put out on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that sort of thing, so that everybody knows within Worcestershire that SWEP has been called. And obviously, we then work in partnership with all the other referrals. So obviously, MAGs are one of them. We work with StreetLink, and we get referrals from the emergency services, so the NHS or the fire stations or police, but also it goes out to libraries and other public places because they can also refer. We do get the odd one or two from strange places, but it is about, if somebody knows somebody's rough sleeping and got nowhere to sleep, then they get sent out, and they can refer, and as long as they meet the criteria, which is a very low criteria, basically for Worcester City, which is a communal SWEP, which is run at Hope Church. Hope Church also run some outreach for rough sleepers within their church anyway, those of you that know the church. And we have a communal SWEP there for the Worcester City Centre. And that is ran from, it opens at 9:30 till 8:30. And we've got a big communal room where up to around 20 people can sleep. What's provided there is obviously sleeping bags, sleeping mats, food, drink, that sort of thing. So in Worcester. However, around the districts, they still are using bed and breakfasts. So because obviously they have only 2 or 3 rough sleepers usually, that they just use a bed and breakfast because it's cost effective. However, Redditch are probably going to go communal next year because they've probably had more rough sleepers than Worcester this year, and I'm not quite sure why that is. So this year we have had 36 days activated. If we can compare that to my last look on London, I think London had 11. So if we just look at that, we've called SWEP 3 times more than what London has. And in reality, the London ones were when we had those 2 long cold spells. We also put SWEP on during Christmas. So we do 5 days over Christmas, no matter what, whether it's cold or not, just to help them there. Obviously, there's lots of low lights. You see, it is quite heart-wrenching for people that do care to see so many rough sleepers and people struggling to deal with life. But there are highlights. One of the things I would say is we have had about 115 people, different people, use SWEP throughout the county. From Worcester, only one of them is still there from the first activation. Now, that doesn't mean to say that all of them that came for the first activations have been housed. Majority of them have, whether that's temporary or permanent. But there's 1 or 2 that have just refused to come in because they don't like communal SWEP. So yeah, around the county we have used 850 beds. So obviously that will be some people using them like 3, 4, 5, 6 times, but that's 850 beds that we've put out for people to obviously get out of the cold. There are obviously, with a communal SWEP, you do have issues that there could be people upset with each other, they might not like each other, or they could want to start trying to drink and smoke and things like that in there. However, we've got 2 members of staff on all night long, so they are accommodated and looked after, and if people need to go out for a cigarette, then they're encouraged to go out for a cigarette rather than try smoking inside the hall. Obviously, we will then, in the morning, we will check them out. And one of the things that we do is checking them out is in Worcester, we will send them to usually Max, but we will advise them of other places that they can go. Obviously, the church also works with people, so there will be the days that the church stay open for them to use their cafe, and I offer them free hot drinks. Usually a piece of toast or something as well. Yeah, so that's really how SWEP works. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us a pen portrait of what you do and how the service works. Thank you. So open it up for questions, comments around the table.
Am I on? It's not really a question, it's more of a statement, I think. What services you provide and what I've listened to, my hats are off to you, and what depths you go to. Because a lot of the time people that seek help afterwards, they're like, actually, nah, because they're stuck in such a rut, they want to go back to that. But after listening to what you both offer, I believe that what you're doing is tremendous. So hats off to both of you. Thank you. Oh.
Do you want to respond to that, and then I'll take further questions?
I did it quietly. Thank you so much.
I think one of the things is people that work within care, it's not a career, it is a passion. And every person that I work alongside, whether it's from the company that I work for or other companies, it is a passion. It's about trying to make that difference. And if we make a difference in our own lives, if we make a difference to one person's life, then it was worth living. And we make more than one person's life better. So.
Chair, thank you. You mentioned at the top of the presentation about perhaps there are increasing numbers of people you're encountering who are got mental health issues, for example. I wonder, perhaps over, just to take a sort of random figure, maybe over the last 5 years, admittedly there has been COVID, etc. in that, whether you've seen any kind of shifts in terms of, you know, we take any one cohort, so to speak, at any one time. Are we dealing with more people who've got really deep problems? You know, are the percentages within that number changing? I think is essentially what I'm...
Yes, I think we are, if we just take a snapshot, I don't have the figures available, but just looking from memory, there is a lot more enduring significant mental health issues. As we see mental health services reducing due to funding, then we are seeing the fallout from that.
Yeah, and I've been working with homeless people either as a volunteer or professionally since 1990. And one of the things that I have found since then, in 1990 and that sort of era, it would have been more a lot of drug related and drunkenness, that sort of thing, where now there's a lot, it's probably more 50-50 now than what it used to be. It was quite rare in 1990 to have people on the streets with mental health issues, major mental health issues. You get the odd one or two, but now there's a lot more, probably 50% of them. And then there'll be another percentage that have got mental health issues because they're also taking drugs or alcohol. But one of the other things that I've also noticed in my years is that there's a lot more younger people under the age of 30 also hitting the streets, and those are usually the ones that have got some form of mental health issues. The older ones seem to have not quite so severe, they still have him, but I found a lot of the younger ones are in some real problems with their mental health.
Thank you. Actually, one of the things I was going to ask, have you noticed a shift in the demograph, and it was towards younger people and maybe more, you mentioned couples, are you seeing more people that you wouldn't expect to be rough sleeping, or is it still roughly the same sort of cause? And do we need to intervene earlier as a council to stop people perhaps getting to the state where they are rough sleeping from homeless? You know, is it family breakdown? Do we, you know, we've got the mental health, but I mean, is there anything we can do to sort of stop them getting to the stage where they're in a state where they need more help, if you see what I mean?
Currently, the demographics are roughly the same. However, with the cost of living crisis, that may change quite significantly. So we don't know what is going to happen in the future and very soon future. Early intervention is the best thing, and you can talk, I'm sure you'll talk about hopes next. If we can prevent, then that is so much better for the person, and it's also better for the local councils, because it's actually a lot more cost effective to prevent somebody from becoming homeless than waiting until crisis, somebody's homeless. And we also see, if you can intervene on a person who has become rough sleeping within 3 weeks, it is very easy to turn them round. However, it seems about the 3-week point, and it's the same as when you develop habits. They say it takes 3 weeks to develop a habit, and you can see people starting to spiral down, and you can see them becoming more and more entrenched. So it's really, really important to have early intervention, and Hope Service is one of those that try and prevent people becoming homeless.
Yeah, so within CCP, we do have a hopes team, which is the prevention team, which people get referred to us, usually through the city council, and we try and work with them so that they're not becoming homeless. So that would be to help with rent arrears and help get their finances sorted out, help get their mental health sorted out, that kind of thing. But other things that we really do need to be looking at is single people's housing is something that's not that readily available. Usually in a big city, there's loads of single houses, but they're all taken by students. Obviously, Worcester has exactly that problem, as so does Birmingham and all the other big cities. So it's trying to find single dwellings which are affordable, which landlords are willing to let out to a single person long term rather than just for a year. And then the other thing that I have noticed as well, again, since being on the streets in 1990, and more of a volunteer, I see this rather than as a professional, is a lot more family breakdown. Usually a stepfather or a stepmother has kicked out the stepson or stepdaughter, and they have nowhere to turn. So it's a family breakdown, and the child's being told to leave. So that's a little bit harder to deal with as well. So it's getting alongside them and trying to prevent that as quickly as possible. Now, most councils will react pretty quickly to somebody who's 21, 22, who's just been kicked out of home. Yeah, and obviously family breakdown and that has also increased since COVID. So, and that's what I was saying, that I'm seeing a lot more younger people that have had family breakdowns that have been kicked out by step parents usually. And obviously it's then getting the right services involved, because if they're 19, 20, 21, a lot of young people's services will pick them up and get them somewhere pretty quickly. So it's not that they're going to be on the streets for 3 or 4 weeks, but they may be on the streets for 3 or 4 days. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to echo what Councillor Dita said about the gratitude I think that we all have for your work. And I was privileged enough to witness it when I used to, long time ago now, when I used to be a local authority officer doing drop-in sessions there. So the dedication and I suppose it's a vocation issue of people who help those most vulnerable is commendable. My question is around the trauma-informed approach to trying to support some of those service users. I know that Jonathan Sutton and St. Paul's Hostel use it, they apply it. Is it something that you're looking into, since this is a health and wellbeing committee?
Yes, it's very important to adopt a trauma-informed approach. The statistics are the majority of rough sleepers have 6 or more ACEs. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. So you can actually track, as we said, the demographic is still remaining constant. You can actually track a rough sleeper's issues from early childhood. I also had a worker who used to work initially with people with special needs in Malvern, and when he came to work with us, so many of our service users went, "Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello, sir," which shows that this is a very common situation. So yes, we do adopt a trauma-informed approach, and all of my team are trained in this, and it's about developing, and people won't fully recover from their trauma. It's impossible. It's about developing the coping strategies to enable them to continue and live as fulfilling lives as possible.
One of the statistics within our training will be that for every year somebody has been damaged, it takes 2 years to put that right. So if you imagine somebody at the age of 14 has been damaged for 10 years and they're 24 years old, it's going to take us until they're 44 to be anywhere near correct. So that's what we're up against, and that is, as Mel, I say call you Meg then, sorry.
It's almost right.
As Mel says, the ACEs are always high on these, and it usually is something from their childhood, and they don't start dealing with it until they're in their 20s, and by then you're talking 10 years of damage before they've even hit the streets. Then they're out on the streets at 20, 30, and you've got 20 years to try and recover, which is basically the rest of their lives.
Thank you. Yeah. Some people have just incredibly difficult starts and no opportunity in life, really. The Housing First scheme under COVID was, I guess, generally regarded as sort of successful by everybody. What is different in terms of what's available now? What is not available that Housing First did provide? Because I think, no, the general public are now seeing a visibility of rough sleepers again, or of people begging, which may or may not be the same thing. Just talk me through that.
For me, it's really simple. Government funding's not there anymore. That's that simple.
Fair enough. Okay. So there's the funding that was there during COVID is not around to support it now.
No, it's probably a third, if not less.
And in terms of kind of public visibility, people who are begging on the high street are or are not necessarily rough sleeping. Is it an exact cross match or not?
No. When I give talks, I explain to people the difference. So there are people who are rough sleeping. You see them on the streets. There are people who are sofa surfing and living in bashes, so that they have no permanent accommodation, and that's not stable. And somebody can flip between rough sleeping and sofa surfing. We have homeless people who can be in temporary accommodation and hostels and SWEP. Mm-hmm. And then we have beggars. You do not know whether that beggar is a rough sleeper or not. The majority are, and they use it to fund their issues. And we always recommend that people don't give to beggars. Give it to organisations that can help, because you never know where that money is going to.
Thank you. If I can ask a further question. So as a local authority, you know, Worcester City Council, we are the housing authority, and I know we commission or partly commission some of your services. Is there anything else that you think we should be doing or could be doing? You know, this is your opportunity to give a message to us as the councillors that make some of the decisions, and obviously our officers that are involved with it. Anything else that you think we should know or you'd like us to be able to do?
I wouldn't mind people having a look into the protocol of SWEP, because I find 0 degrees extremely cold and too low to be calling SWEP. If we think that our fridges are running at 4 degrees, none of us would want to sit in our fridge all day long, would we? Therefore, if we think about that, if we could even just up it to 2 degrees so that we can get people in for maybe 60 days of the winter, it would be a little bit more helpful to them and to us, because it is quite hard when we're throwing people out at 8:30 in the morning when it's still a little bit chilly and you know it's only getting to 1 or 2 degrees on that night. If we could just try and change that protocol, but obviously we're governed by the law, and the only people that can change that would be individual counties, and obviously changing it to 0 degrees for one night is absolutely superb for Worcester, and I take your hat off to it, because I don't know of another county that does that. So it is a feather in your hat, in your cap for that reason. But if I could plead with people, it would be to take it up to 2 degrees.
Hang on. Sorry. I'm going to plug Homeless and Rough Sleeper Strategy, the Worcestershire Homelessness and Rough Sleeper Strategy. Lloyd, you know I have scrutinised it very intently. And there are lots of pathways and protocols that are being developed, which is commendable, and it does address some of those needs. And the Worcester City Action Plan is getting there quite considerably now. However, I would recommend more accommodation options. It is really important for that. Square pegs do not fit in round holes. Everyone is different, so we need a more variety of accommodation options available to people with support.
Any other questions or comments from members? Well, once again, thank you very much for coming out this evening. Thank you for sharing all that information with us, and thank you for the services that you provide. We know you're making a real difference to people's lives and to our city, and that really is appreciated. Thank you.
I have one final comment. So, and I think this is the same for CCP. Our mottos are, where there is breath, there is hope. So we never give up on anyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're welcome to stay, but you're also welcome to go.
It's been a very long day, so...
Is there anything exciting on the agenda?
Depends what excites you. Some of our performance indicators do include rough sleep, issues around rough sleeping. Okay, so next item on the agenda is our proposed committee performance scorecard, and it's kind of this time of year within the council year in which we look at the programme ahead and the projects that fall within this committee. So Lloyd, are you talking us through this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I won't take up too much time. That's a very difficult act to follow anyway. As you say, this is next year's committee scorecard. So this is the proposed scorecard that this committee will have oversight of. Usual fashion, it's split into key projects and activities, front half, and then the back half is key performance indicators. We are proposing to continue with the two projects, one around active travel and one around implementing the recommendations from the Child Poverty Task and Finish group. And what we want to do is to have 2 new indicators for next year. One brings together the 2 health-related indicators from last year around integrated care system arrangements and the Worcester City health and wellbeing priorities. And we want to tie that up into 1 new indicator, which is the delivery of the Worcester City health and wellbeing collaborative priorities. So that's the collaborative now that moves the health and wellbeing agenda forward in Worcester City. We have a member sat on that, the chair and vice chair of this committee, and officers. So we believe we can deliver a lot of what this council wants through the collaborative. And the other new project relates to the food poverty JSNA, which we discussed at the last committee. And we think it would be a good idea for this committee to have oversight of our response to that and our reaction to it. So that's in respect of projects. And then in respect of performance indicators, hopefully members will have picked up that we've moved to having targets now for each of the indicators for the next year. It was the first year of this committee last year, so we had a lot of baselines in there. But we believe we've got the right numbers now to put in there for targets for next year. And at the bottom of the appendix, you'll see the performance indicators that we are proposing. So there are 2 around housing. One is the number of households helped through Household Support Fund. So Warwick will talk us through a paper in a moment around how we intend to use the 23-24 funding. We'd like to track how many people that we are supporting through that. And given this committee now has responsibility for financial welfare and assistance, we'd also like the committee to have oversight of the number of awards made through the DUAS scheme, which we had a paper on last time as well. And then there are 2 additional performance indicators. One is around the number of young people referred into the one-to-one walk and talk mentoring delivered through Warwick's youth engagement team. And similarly, the number of young people supported through mental health support. So I'm happy to stop there, Chair, and between the 3 of us, we'll take questions.
Right, Matt first, and then Robin.
Just a couple of quick questions. The number of young people referred to one-to-one walk and talk mentoring. What exactly is one-to-one walk and talk mentoring? Who provides it? And on page 10, should there be a target for the number of young people supported through mental health support? Because there's no numbers there at the moment at the top of page 10.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, the City Council employs youth intervention officers. They're partly funded, or a number of the posts are funded through the county Container Outbreak Management Fund, which was then replaced by other county public health funding and extended to March 2025. And one of the themes of that funding is to provide this one-to-one walk and talk mentoring. It's something that was established during the pandemic. Anne Nichols, our team lead for youth intervention work, found that young people were struggling with online support during the pandemic, and so moved to do the walk and talk, which started off as literally walking around the riverside with a co-worker and the young person pre-arranged with the parents, and it worked really well. And so we've continued that on, and the benefits of it are relayed to county, and so they extended the provision through their funding too. So that relates directly to that work. It's either the person is referred internally, obviously from the work that they do from their detached work, or it can be from a school referral or another agency referral. But we're because of the numbers, I mean, it's a 6-week course, so it can be shorter than that if the person benefits from it sooner, or they don't get kicked off the end of it if they're still not quite where they need to be. So it's a flexible service, even though it's sort of suggested it's 6 weeks. And we've chosen 12 because it's only a small team. That's literally we don't want to sort of suggest that we can do lots and lots of people as part of this, but it's a number that's a significant number for Worcester and what we can deliver.
Warwick almost gave me enough time to find the answer to your question, Matt. So you'll recall either the last committee or the committee before, this members approved some match funding for two mental health support posts, one for young people between the age of 8 and 12, I think, and one for young people between the age of 16 and 18. And that's going to be delivered through on-site advocacy. They're going to be based and working with a small number of schools. And so the number of children that they'll be, and young people they'll be supporting Councillor Lamb, that will be the number that we'll put into those boxes there. It's just a typo. We've left it out. From memory, and I had a conversation with Ruth on this last week or so, I think it's around 80 children and young people that will be supported through those two posts over the next year.
Thank you. Further to that point then, Lloyd, do we know which schools on-site advocacy will be working with?
I don't, Councillor Northup, but what I'll do, we'll clarify that and we'll send a note out to all members of this committee to clarify.
Thank you.
Sorry, through the chair, I can give a bit more context. They have been working closely with the county. I can't remember the names of the ones that they've highlighted, but they've worked with county to identify, because there is a similar, or the same service being delivered already in Worcester, so this is additional to that. So what they've done is gone through, they have like a green, amber and red list.
Right.
So they've looked at the red list schools and basically targeting it into those most needed.
Okay, thanks. And then on the KPI for exercise by prescription referrals, I think we had some discussion a meeting or two ago about those just being diabetes courses. There are, of course, other conditions which would benefit by exercise by prescription. Are we counting those, or is it just limited to specific health conditions?
As far as I'm aware, it remains the diabetes project, but again, I will double check with Alan and come back to an update committee if there's any change to that. What I would say is I draw your attention to the first of the KPIs, which is the number of ICS health initiatives supported. So we're certainly looking for other opportunities to expand that type of work, and we may be able to report it through that first KPI.
Andy, you've got to do next.
Thank you, Chair. A bit like Matt, I read from the bottom up, and I didn't understand that bottom one at all, and I still don't, I'm afraid. But my basic point, for reflection rather than to do anything about it, is I'm not sure whether these. Oh, and I should say, I appreciate there's more layers below these, and there's other committees, and there's bound to be some overlap, isn't there? But I'm not sure whether these measures tell us where Worcester City Council has made an intervention, and there's either an improvement or perhaps not improvement, or whether it measures the environment, what other people are doing. Both are valid, but if it's too much of measuring what other people are doing, it's a blinking shame, because it underplays the importance of Worcester City Council as a district council. And not to be, I'm thinking in terms of mind, spirit, body and environment and all community well-being stuff. And not to be too boring about it, but it's not far off, because if you go to the King's Fund, where they talk about what we should be measuring, they talk about homelessness, home adaptations, and these sort of things are in here, and we make a difference. But where I'm making using a lot of words to get to quite a narrow point, really. But what it doesn't do enough for me is recognise the value of the City Council in terms of leisure and activity. And that could be easily done. I'm not saying that this committee should be doing it, but this committee ought to be interested in the success of what others are doing. The obvious measure is the Riverside Walk was an intervention of the City Council with County and Susterns. very successful, it's been too, but it's not finished, is it? We know, don't we? We were at a meeting this week. It goes on. But wouldn't it be nice to know how many people are, and I know that the data is available, wouldn't it be nice to know how many people are taking advantage of that? And that would give an indication of how many people are exercising. And look, and there must be other ones as well, where a successful city council, using a good strategy, is making a difference, and always keeping your eye on the fact it might tail off, and you need to reinvigorate it. But some of these measures don't do it for me. Lloyd, not for now, mate, but for a reflection on the future.
And I think as a substitute member of the committee, you perhaps haven't seen the development over a period. It certainly is my understanding that these performance measures are specifically linked to district council activities and things that we have funded or that we've worked in collaboration with stakeholders, and it's not other people's activity. But Lloyd, you can perhaps kind of confirm or talk us through that.
No, and I think it's a fair challenge, and I think as officers we'll probably be the first to admit that we have a challenging time trying to get a committee scorecard that meets everybody's expectations. Councillor Denham's right. Everything that's listed here in respect to performance indicators, either we've funded, we deliver, or we have influence over. So hopefully that will reassure members. The other challenge we have sometimes is differentiating between outputs and performance. And sometimes a lot of the things you'll see in some of the lists, they do tend to be output rather than performance. But fair challenge, point noted.
Steve, next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I guess my sort of comments kind of build upon previous comments. Really, is that my observation is that certainly some of these KPIs are kind of activity based. You know, counting what you've done rather than impact based, it's a challenge to find measures that are feasible and meaningful and measurable. I do think that there is some scope within what's already been presented in this paper for small adjustments that might go some way towards giving us more of a flavour of the impact of the activities rather than just counting things that we've done. For example, number of exercise by prescription referrals. If that's meeting a need, then people will complete the course. So the percentage of people completing the course of exercise by prescription would give, if that's low, you'd think, hang on a minute, maybe this course is just not hitting the mark for where people are at and what their needs are. Similarly, perhaps looking at a number of disabled people living independently through home adaptations, so that measuring, how many adaptations have we achieved in the year. But I mean, maybe a measure is the timeliness of those adaptations, so that they were discharged from hospital quicker or what have you. So it might be along the lines of percentage completed within the anticipated time frame. I mean, a similar sort of thing with the one-to-one walk and talk mentoring, that again, people referred to it, is quite a different measure from young people actually doing it, engaging with it, which would then give this committee a flavour for how these services are perceived, are they being used, and having some impact.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I mean, is it feasible to adapt to some of those? It's how challenging is. I know some of that data is available, because with regards to the prescription referrals, I think I have seen information in the past about how many people actually completed the programme. No, I mean, so yeah, Have we got data? Is it possible to smarten up some of the suggested KPIs?
Yeah, I think Warwick just wants to come in on one of the elements, but yeah, I don't think anything Councillor Cochrane has proposed changes the nature of the KPI, and we're more than happy just to take those comments away and make some last minute amends if committee are happy, to turn those into proper performance indicators rather than just output indicators.
Yeah, I think the subjects which the performance indicators are looking at, I have no issue with, and I think they're absolutely relevant. Of course, as you say, they're services which are influence funded or done by the council itself, and I think this committee has previously agreed that they are priorities. So I think that goes without saying. Yeah, as for me, it's more about when we come back to these and we look at the data, I'd like to have an idea from that data that not just that services happened, but they were utilised effectively and had an impact. Yeah.
Through Chair, yeah. So just an explanation of how the performance data is reported, really, I think, which is probably what you're driving at, is what we try and do is give you an indicator that sort of summarises the area of work, and then you'll get a graph and stats based on that overarching summary, and then in the notes we'll give you more detail. So we try not to give you 50 indicators because we can't also, the way it's reported, we can't link two indicators together. It's like one indicator. So the best way of us to sort of set the scene is have that summary indicator and then give you a bit of context then in the notes. So the sorts of things that you're asking for would be covered in a typical sort of note to the overarching indicator. Hope that helps.
Thank you. And there's always a balance, isn't there, about the effort required to collect the data versus its value and interest. But I think that's really helpful. I've got Tom next.
Thank you very much. So just a quick comment on what my colleague was saying here, that I struggled a little bit as well for reasons that are a little bit clearer now, to differentiate between the measures and the impact of some of those KPIs. But I was going to ask about something else. So we talk elsewhere on the agenda about food poverty. And perhaps this is something which is included in the Worcester City Health and Wellbeing collaborative priorities or somewhere else. So forgive me if I'm missing it, but should we be thinking as well about not only food but dietary advice, I suppose? And the reason I'm asking about this, it's not trivial, I think, because food can be it's the basis for the well-being, and being married to a teacher, she can tell people, young students in her classroom who eat well, healthy, and those who don't necessarily have healthy diets. So is there anything in the measures that sort of drives at trying to capture healthy diets and perhaps improving those? That would be my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the reference to the food poverty joint strategic needs assessment, that is a project piece of work, and it is specifically about carrying forward the work and the recommendations from the report that was done specifically for this committee. I don't know within the district collaborative whether they've got other initiatives around healthy eating and so on. I guess we always have to be mindful as a district council our levels of responsibility and involvement. Are the district collaborative talking about healthy eating per se?
It's not something that we've gone into any great detail on, and I was myself and Warwick were just having a quick chat around whether or not the food poverty JSNA picked up sort of healthy eating and dietary advice in particular. We think there's probably reference to it, but there's not one specific recommendation or a section on it. But yes, similarly to Councillor Denham, I think you've just got to be careful of mission creep, and just conscious of what we as a district council have started responsibilities for and what we've already committed to doing. But I do think through the collaborative, that is one area that we will need to pick up, Councillor Petrosky, because if you recall, one of the 3 priority areas for us is a good start in life. So I can't see how healthy eating can't focus as part of that conversation.
And in fact, within the food poverty JSNA is the Healthy Start programme and the access to vitamins and vouchers for mums-to-be and preschool children. And one of the pieces of work is to get a bigger uptake of that programme, because it's at about sort of 60% at present of those eligible take it up. So depending how you define healthy eating, there is some of it within that. But thank you for raising the topic. I mean, I think there are some. Thank you to officers for drawing this up. There are some interesting numbers in it. As a huge fan of the Access Able Access Guide, I think, you know, to celebrate that we have 300 public venues that are mapped in terms of disability accessibility in all sorts of different ways is really important, and aspiration to do more. And we know that you know, other agencies and public buildings, the Business Improvement District are keen to take that forward. And the other one of the new targets that gives me kind of particular pause for thought is, you know, number of households helped through the Household Support Fund. 1,500 households just within Worcester City who need that help or going to need that kind of help is, I think, significant pause for thought in this day and age. Any further comments or thoughts? Okay, well, thank you to members for engaging in that. Are we happy in principle to sign off to agree to the proposed content with some bits of tweaking going forwards? Yep, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Which takes us on to the Household Support Fund. So we have a report that kind of looks backwards and forwards. So we're going to kind of take it in chunks. Over to you, Warwick.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for welcoming this report this evening. I'll take it from councillors how much detail you want to go into. So I'll give you a bit of a summary and then we can dive into the detail where you want to, I think is probably best. So the Department of Work and Pensions has been allocating the Household Support Fund since October 2021, and the narrative of all that, the nature of the response has been quite short term. So they've been identified and allocated in 6 month periods since that time. So we've had 3 tranches of it. And the nature of the timing and announcements of those funds has meant that previously, as councillors, we've had to act quite swiftly. We've had to work with partners to identify need, allocation, and deliver within quite within quite tight time frames. Sorry, I'll get some water in a minute. And so So in order to deliver that in time, we've used the MD's urgency powers and then reported on how we've allocated the funding through Policy and Resources Committee. The nature, after now we're on our 4th tranche, it's become more of an established practice. So it's given us, well, we've had the announcement from the Department of Work and Pensions that they're going to continue on for the next 12 months in the same manner with the same allocations. So it's given us the opportunity to bring it to the committee it was always supposed to sit under in advance for consideration. So hence the report tonight is that, again, working with partners and officers who have identified recommendations to how to allocate the funding. So just to give you a bit of a background to the why now and not before for your information. So the government's announced in 2.3, I've mentioned here, that over a 12-month period from the 1st of April to the March 31st, 2024, the county will be awarded 7.8 million. So there's and that's to be allocated to the county council and then the district councils that sit within the county. And you can see the principles of how that 7.8 million has been used in 2.6 for 2022-23. So the county allocates a quite considerable amount of the funding to free school meal vouchers for those children in school under the pupil premium scheme. They've been doing some targeted work with pensioners around carers and disabilities and medical device usage. There's a considerable amount of money put into energy vouchers through the Act on Energy scheme for Worcestershire. And there's a district element we'll get to in a minute. And then there's a contingency element that they've been using in order to be able to respond to demand, but also cover the increase in administration through the county council. And then in the per each 6-month tranche, the allocation is split out to the districts, and you see that Worcester has been getting just shy of 190,000 each 6-month period. So so we've had 3 allocations of 190,000 over the time. And then I won't go into the detail, but 2.7 down to 2.17 shows the sorts of things you're allowed to spend it on. And again, this is all based on the Department of Work and Pensions advice, or the parameters for the funding, and how we have to report back on how it's allocated. And with our allocation, the city over those sort of 3 tranches has prioritised the discretionary welfare assistance scheme. It's an established scheme which third-party charities and organisations understand and already referred into for when people were in need and crisis. So it was identified as well, we were trying to use established ways of distributing funding rather than creating new, because then you have to sort of, it's a lot harder to educate and turn it around so fast. You've got to remember this is in a scenario where we're having to act quickly and to get the money out to where it's needed. But we had increased the parameters of the existing discretionary welfare assistance scheme. So a single household offer was included, increased the number of and frequency of energy and food vouchers awarded. We increased the amount of energy vouchers we could award up to £49. And then started to include some other essential items related to cost of living to be able to support families and families with children. As you can understand, Worcester Food Bank very much in a key location in Worcester, and already again providing services and recognised pathway of referral for Worcester Citizens Advice Bureau and other referrers. So prioritising funding going into them, and of course Worcester Food Bank themselves have learned over a few years that it's not just food that people need, it's cleaning products, it's clothing, it's travel vouchers and those sorts of things, just to be able to survive. So that was a high priority area. And then last summer, the council identified that preschool children weren't receiving any specific targeted benefit from household support funds. So identified that we'd like to widen the county offer of free school meals during some holidays to providing supermarket vouchers for preschool children during these times and for college students. And so we've over the half term, Christmas and February half term, over the last sort of 6 months, we've allocated £25,000 to support that through the Household Support Fund. And then we've also prioritised the Spend to Save scheme, which is available for people at risk of losing their home due to utility bills or paying the rent. Because of other outgoing costs that they can't afford, and before the Household Support Fund was a loan, so people would have had a loan off the council and had to pay that back, obviously with debt advice and that sort of thing over a period of time. But with the Household Support Fund, we're able to make that a grant, so people wouldn't have to pay it back, but obviously still receive the debt advice and financial planning as part of the package to support them. Other initiatives that we've run are multi-agency crisis funds. So we identified frontline services out in our communities which were having conversations and engagements with people in crisis, either waiting to get to be referred to various elements, or literally one was a flat mobility scooter battery. I needed a new battery, so literally couldn't get anywhere, isolated. So that's the sort of thing. It's like a crisis fund for, where you can't go anywhere else to get support. And so that was bought from one of the frontline services. And so that sort of thing. It could be an emergency food because they can't, the food bank's closed, or it could be anything like that. But basically a small amount of money, relatively small amount of money, 50 quid on average to help someone out in a crisis. And then obviously we allocated a bit to actually for those charities to be able to administer that fund, because obviously it's unfair to sort of ask them to do everything with no actual sort of support for administration. And then Age UK did an amazing job on one of the previous tranches to do some real door knocking, phone calling, active engagement to make sure people were aware that they're accessing all the, it was a bit of befriending, or the, are you okay type call, outreach, and then that conversation about your circumstances, and because obviously they're primary frontline deliverers for the advice network. They can triage a lot of inquiries, accessing Act on Energy for those energy vouchers, or with the handyman service, or all the sorts of schemes that they provide. But we're able to direct and engage in lots of our residents where this had failed, basically, to get the message out, because literally they were calling them up or knocking on the door, so making a massive difference to those people. And then lastly, we did again on that sort of vein, about making sure people are aware of what services and support was out there. We commissioned some door knocking and some on-street engagement between the 16th and 18th of February. And I managed to reach 1,400 residents with direct engagements over those 3 days. A lot of people unaware of the services that are available out there, or just really grateful that someone took the time to come and knock the door to say, "Are you aware?" Really appreciated, and being able to either sort of recommend to friends and family if they felt they might need or benefit from the service. So that's how we spent the money so far. I'll just quickly introduce the child poverty corporate funding, and then I'll go through the preferred options. So the child poverty corporate funding has obviously been under the oversight of this committee since, I don't know how, certainly it's the last couple of committee meetings it's been brought to. At the last committee meeting, it was identified that 3,200 of the £50,000 corporate funding should be allocated to a new community fridge project at Dines Green, and that's been initiated to be delivered through Worcester Community Trust. And so the fridge has been bought, and it's being set up as we speak. But there was also a request to bring back options to allocate the remainder of that funding, and this paper is hoping to cover that too for you.
Warwick, can I
Yeah.
suggest maybe we kind of pause at that point and take kind of questions or comments in terms of how
History, yeah.
Yeah, how the money has been spent, and then do the sort of forward look or the proposals for the forthcoming year. So otherwise, might get muddled up between them and the differences. So, in terms of what Warwick's covered and how the household support fund has been spent over the last 18 months, is it now? 18 a month of relative kind of emergency decisions, put it that way. So questions, comments, Robin?
Thank you, Chair. In the table of how we've spent the money in the past, there's reference to 266 children benefiting per week from the school vouchers. That's preschool and college students. The number feels just a little bit low to me. Are we missing any families out?
So the methodology of how we've applied that is through existing nurseries. It's through, and again, because this was something new, it wasn't established. So I talked about obviously trying to use established links. We have increased over time the number of people accessing the vouchers. So a lot, we rely on a word of mouth a lot more for these types of services than we could possibly get out of social media or other bits and pieces. But so that's like an average. So it's the way we sort of pushed it out was through the health visitors going out and promoting it, and so promoting it to health visitors first to get it into their sort of narrative and patter of talking to the families about what offer is available, and our relationship with them has developed over time, and also the network and relationship with nurseries has developed over time, and so has increased the number of preschool people engaging. So the 16 to 18-year-olds, we reached out to all 16 to 18-year-old education providers. So it's going through education providers, not wider offer. So that probably helps you identify the sort of, that might limit the numbers. But then we've also found that some colleges have their own way of doing it, so they weren't interested in accessing it. So it's only certain colleges that have taken us up on the offer.
Any other questions from colleagues? Matt?
I suppose it's just worth commenting that not all 16 to 18-year-olds are in full-time education, are in schools and colleges. So there is always the danger that you're missing a trick there because, they might be in employment, or they might be in training, or they might be NEETs, for example. So they might not necessarily be getting the support they need, which is the point.
I guess that's part of the question of where responsibilities lie, but it's a useful reminder, isn't it, of need and potentially unmet need. Because I think also, the county council provide the holiday activities programme, and I've certainly seen data that suggests the uptake of that is much higher amongst primary school children, and that teenagers are less likely to, and therefore less likely to be being fed during the school holidays. Yes, it's certainly on public health radar. Thank you. I mean, I think looking at the eligibility criteria is, but it's a bit of a sad indictment of life in Britain today that, civil services is sitting working these things out and acknowledging that a significant percentage of the population are going to need help with being able to afford food and water. also kind of noted in paragraph 211, the complexity around housing costs and how housing benefit, universal credit and different bits kind of interact as to, it must be incredibly difficult to map your way through that as an individual in need or at risk of losing your home. A question with regarding to the sort of marketing and promotion as to, I mean, exactly how did that work and how successful was it, do we think?
Through Chair. So from the cost of living conference and other engagements with partners, we're reflecting in the fact that we're good at pushing out and engaging with those people that we engage with, but you never know who you don't know, as it were. And also we're all very public service professionals. We're not marketing companies, and marketing companies are particularly good at targeting specific demographics. And so we had that reflection of if only one of us came from the evil world of marketing, so we could apply that sort of hidden magic and dark magic to what we do. So we did a bit of a scoping. We realized that we had actually worked with an event management company, a marketing company, or supported their event, which was the government's rollout of the vaccine program. And it was a company that was employed by across the country to promote the vaccine program, and they'd done an event in Worcester by Asda. And so we reached out to them really just to sort of see how they do it and what they would do. And so we came up with this 3-day activity. Certainly it's been very valuable. As mentioned, we've hit just shy of 1,500 people in the 3 days, and that's with direct engagement rather than just shoving something through a letterbox. So we worked with them to identify particular areas in Worcester where we felt that people might not be accessing existing services. So we weren't necessarily targeting areas where there's like a social housing provider or something who would be providing that information through their service. It was trying to identify maybe the first-time buyer market or the private rented market in Worcester. So we had a stab, but we weren't 100% successful. I did end up sending door knocking down to some areas where it turned out to be quite affluent. So lesson learned, not to target those areas again. We're not all infallible, but and the timings weren't quite right in places. People either weren't back from work or school, or so if we're going to do it again, there's definitely lessons learned that we can apply. But we designed with this company a leaflet that basically we wanted to keep it short and snappy. So if you're in an elevator pitch with someone about where to find help and what all the help was, well, you'd be referring them to Citizens Advice Bureau or HUK if they're over 65. And then we used the space to talk about on-site advocacies, mental health support and community trust on the leaflet. So we designed a very punchy leaflet that went out with them, so people had something to hold on to take information from. It didn't just have QR codes, it had telephone numbers and addresses and opening hours, so that, that people could have a face to talk to if in need. And the conversation, as I say, we had 1,400, 1,500 conversations. And the people we were engaging with, very few were negative. Nearly all positive on engagements on the doorstep. And people, the primary concerns were energy bills, cost of food, and petrol being too high at the time. So some of the areas where we do not had a very high uptake, or people were taking the leaflet to refer later or to pass on to friends and family. and the public was were, you know, some great feedback. Didn't know the offer was available. Didn't know the variety of the services that are available. This is a great help because of my circumstances. Yeah, so some specific questions to take away for to answer. So, certainly something I think is very valuable, having that face-to-face interaction and one-to-one interaction too.
Thank you. That's a really useful kind of background and further information to that, I guess. A lot of us around the table are quite experienced at door knocking and talking to people and identifying different demographics within our wards and areas. But thank you for that. Any further questions in terms, Tom? Yeah.
Just very briefly. Well, first of all, the direct engagement is very successful based on the numbers that you just quoted, Warwick. So that's really positive. But I was just thinking about household segmentation, because that kind of thing can be done based on the census data, and it's not, the cost is not prohibitive, as in, you know, the credit score people, Experian and various other people can marry up the household types with the specific postcodes. So just something to consider, perhaps.
Thank you. Yeah, so I work with partners basically to identify some of those locations. Based from their experience of door knocking, as well as where they felt their, you know, but yeah, I only got a couple wrong. It wasn't like they're all wrong. There's only a couple. And one of those, which I think was reflected back, was quite, because we were identifying particular areas on the map. I think Rainbow Hill is particularly complex. You can't just like do an area like that. So I think that was one of them. Because it was like quite mixed housing in Rainbow Hill. So yeah, I have learned.
Thank you. And of course, I mean, the census data is only just coming out, really, isn't it, in terms of info? Stephen?
Yes, I've got a question. Really, it could apply to any part of this discussion, really. Obviously, it's primarily funded by the household support funding from central government, not that totally passed down to. Is the city council, are we monitored anywhere by central government in terms of how we're actually using our money in that, and what sort of feedback do we get, and is what we're actually doing comparable to what other authorities are actually doing?
Yeah, through you, Chair. The Department of Work and Pensions is quite prescriptive of what it wants feedback on. That has changed over time, because obviously we're all doing it on the hoof, I guess. So for each round, the information it wants back has changed, and slightly more complex, probably, to be fair to say, in the future round and the last round. And what happens is, when we allocate the funding, either to a third party like Worcester Food Bank or Worcester Community Trust or one of the other providers, we're quite clear that they're getting this money because they have to record how it's allocated. The breakdown tends to be how much is spent, family with children, family with a mature member of the family, so over 65, pension age, and then now there's more detail about disability, isn't there, in the family. And then they want it broken into how the money was allocated. So was it through a voucher scheme? Was it through buying something? Was it through various segmented ways of how it was allocated? And there's another way of splitting it as well. What was the other way? I can't remember off the top of my head. There's another table as well. They have to. So it's the volumes, it's the amount, it's how it's allocated. Pretty much is how it's broken down. So so that's all collated, and that's how we've got to. That's how we've included that one KPI in the previous paper, to say number of houses supported, families supported.
Thank you. Yes, that's useful to know. have to meet the government requirements, don't you, in order to get the continuity funding. Have we yet got sort of comparative data or feedback back out from government, as it were, from what they've collected?
We haven't been able to, we haven't been given a comparative data set, no. County collate it all from the districts and hand it back to us. No one's been upset with the figures that we receive. And plus, obviously, County are running some of our services as well, like the Act on Energy vouchers. They're commissioning that directly to Act on Energy. We do get a breakdown of engagement, though. So we do know that in comparison, a lot of Worcester residents are accessing Act on Energy vouchers. I think Redditch probably is the highest number. Wyre Forest tends to be quite higher for Act on Energy, and then Worcester's third in the uptake. When you look at the tables, it seems about right, depending on the need.
Thank you. Any further comments in terms of how the money's been spent? Okay, so now looking forwards to the financial year ahead of us, informed by where we've been.
Yeah, through you, Chair. As I've mentioned previously, the principle we applied to date is to apply the additional funding through recognised channels. This is and then widening the scope or the criteria to flex them up to meet the demands of the cost of living crisis. So this also means that if funding when the funding ceases and stops, people are still coming to the right people. They're still getting the best advice or the latest advice rather than the tap just turning off. That's sort of the methodology we've used so far. And our reflection and our feedback from frontline services that the need isn't diminishing. So the numbers of people accessing the discretionary welfare assistance scheme isn't dropping off. The number of people accessing our spend save services isn't dropping off. The number of people, requesting food vouchers isn't dropping off, and the food bank isn't seeing less people. So we've got a need that we've been supporting that we'd like to obviously continue to provide for. So as I mentioned before, it's a 12-month period. It will probably be given into 6-month blocks, but there's the commitment there for the whole year, so we can make the decision for the whole year. We understand we're going to get the same amount of funding, so it's a 7.8 million for the whole county. However, the methodology for allocating that funding up amongst the districts has changed because there was the districts, the chief officers across the districts recognised that the IND population data didn't necessarily reflect our county populations across the district. So as a result, Worcester received slightly less over the financial year, by 40k. So the allocation over the 12 months would be 337,000. However, since this paper was written, County have notified us that they'd like to give a direct payment of 16,600 to the Worcester Food Bank. So we've added that back into the total. So when I'm briefing now, there'll be slightly amended figures. And we sort of said that in the report that if things change, because things might change as we come towards the end of the month or during the year with government announcements, the presumption is that based on the decision tonight, we'll flex the amounts in proportion, and briefing chair and vice chair. So with the added addition from county, we'd like to so we're going to maintain we're going to recommend that we give Worcester Food Bank 100,000, which matches the previous 12 months. So maintain that using the 16,600 within that allocation to maintain that, but use our then available cash to spread through the other services. So what we'd like to do with the discretionary welfare assistance scheme is increase that to 106,000. As you can see, we've widened the opportunity further to include carpets, energy saving features, so insulating the home really, providing those energy vouchers going forwards, providing the food as well, and working with universal credits, low-income households, and providing essential supplies and energy-saving measures. We'd like to allocate 78,000 to the supermarket vouchers. So that would mean that we could do preschool children and 16 to 18-year-olds for every school holiday, the 13 weeks over the full school year. Again, it's that consistency. We find that we're being asked whether we're going to be providing the same offer the next holiday period. So we suggested obviously it's valued and needed, and so to continue that going forwards. As again, provided through health visitors, nurseries, and spreading the word. And the benefit of doing it through nurseries and health visitors is that you've got that sort of pre-screening when it comes through, and we also know they're only getting one set of vouchers rather than potentially getting 2 or 3 from various means. Just like the schools do, that they can regulate to make sure only one person's receiving the vouchers. Then we'd like to allocate £60,000 to spend to save. Again, this is about people at risk of losing their home, and you know, we've spoken to the committee about the importance of being in the home and staying in their accommodation. So I'd like to continue that over 12 months. And as I mentioned previously, the marketing and promotion we feel is really valuable. This is about getting to the people that aren't accessing the support that's out there at the moment. So we'd like to really carry on with that targeted door knocking engagement over the 12 months. So an allocation of that funding then to carry on delivering. So do you want me to stop there, or do you want me to go on to the child poverty corporate funding?
Thank you. So any questions around that, the proposals for the forthcoming 12 months? Robin?
Thank you, Chair. We're not allocating any money to the multi-agency crisis fund. So I could see that Age UK, Worcester, WCT were granted 25k last year, but not doing anything this year. That's part one. And again, I guess this leads on to, perhaps I'm jumping the gun a bit, but the marketing and promotion, will that include activities that are included in the child poverty corporate funding?
Yeah, so we're receiving less money, so obviously we had to make some specific decisions about how we're allocating. The crisis fund definitely has worked. We've also had Warm Spaces funding that can sort of cover some of that support. But yeah, so we have had to make some decisions because we're ultimately getting less money. And we felt that it has, well, yeah, I mean, that's just one of those judgments that we've had to make on that one. Sorry, what was the second question again?
Marketing and promotion, whether that will cover activities that are happening in the poverty funding spend.
Through your chair, yes. So the extension to the discretionary welfare assistance scheme definitely would be included in that marketing and promotion. The multi-agency crisis fund would be wouldn't necessarily promote that, because that will be the health visitors engaging and using that funding themselves based on their assessment. So yeah.
Any other questions in terms of the proposals and how to spend it? Tom?
So just very briefly, thank you, Chair. Is there any wriggle room in these categories, areas of spend, for additional community fridges? And the reason I'm asking about it is the beauty of those is in eliminating food wastage. while you provide essentially what the food bank does as well. So just a quick question on that.
The challenge with the funding is it's limited, time limited. So we've been able to set up the Dines Green one with but you then might need to find the resource to keep them going. So we haven't so we haven't really included that because we know we're not going to get the revenue funding going forward. So it's, if we found a partner maybe that was willing to take on the the going forwards, that would be something, but we haven't lined those up at the moment. So to set something up without like sustainability included is difficult. We hope that there will be community grant funding which could be used to set up those particular schemes as well coming forward. So that could absolutely welcome an application to the community fund when that's launched in April. And with the fair wind and funding, if sustainability grants come around, they might be relevant for growing food, that sort of thing. So we hadn't included that because of the revenue element, or hadn't considered it because of the revenue implications going beyond the 12 months in this pot.
Yeah, I've certainly had conversations with Worcester Community Trust, and it is easy to underestimate the ongoing maintenance of the contents of the fridge and fetching stuff or throwing stuff away. So, but yeah, as individual councillors, there's the potential to put funding towards possibly. I certainly, as a county councillor, gave the funding to the Tolladine Community Centre for theirs, but do need to be mindful of the ongoing maintenance of those. I just want to say a big thank you to Warwick and to officers, because the whole programme was sort of worked up in a hurry originally, and it's an area of responsibility and an area of activity that actually is new to us as a district council sort of 18 months ago. So it has been a learning curve and a lot of work, and has made a really significant difference to individual lives, individual households within Worcester and our city. So thank you for that, and put that on record. So last bit is child poverty corporate funding. So this is the balance of the funding that was put aside with regard to the recommendations from the Child Poverty Task and Finish Group.
Yeah, so not only the recommendations from that, but also, if you recall, at the last meeting you had representation from headmasters from a couple of schools, and that very much focused our attention on the recommendation for this one. So looking at clothing, school uniform, shoes, beds, bedding, so widening out that discretionary welfare assistance scheme opportunity to include that sort of priority area that was raised at the last meeting, and then as mentioned, the multi-agency crisis fund was a really important fund for us. So we felt that through Action for Children we can focus in on those children in need. Sorry, I coined the phrase. So really that because they'll be the health visitors will be meeting every new child, every new family as part of their work. So it's an opportunity to target that funding into the right locations. So just to then go over the alternative in section 4, we've sort of laid out other ideas, aspirations. In hindsight, maybe we should have put in additional food kitchens, pantries in the other areas. So some of them are obviously where we've previously spent and decided not to recommend them in this particular round. And then other ideas and things that have been put forward. I think school breakfast clubs it's a notional figure, but it's just to reflect the size and scope and of the scale of being provided that, and it's just beyond in the means of what we're being offered or got to provide. And there was an opportunity there about Worcester Wheels and getting people to warm hubs that exist in Worcester, but it's felt that, I say, with the priorities that were identified, that we can deliver more through the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments based on that? Happy with that proposal for the child poverty money? Okay. I'm just looking at the sort of last part of the report in terms of the financial and budgetary implications. And also now under legal and governance, we've got some of the information. The records that must be kept detailing, so that shows us what the kind of monitoring requirements will be. With regard, it says at the bottom of paragraph 5.1, any funds not spent must be returned. What do we think the outturn will be for the period that is about to come to an end, ending 31st of March? Is that the time frame we're at? Are we going to have spent all of Worcester's bit, or do we think?
Yeah, unless Tom corrects me, I think not a single penny from any of the 3 periods has been returned.
Well done, reaching the people that need. So in terms of the report on the recommendations, there's 4 recommendations there, noting the content of the report and the allocation for the forthcoming year, how that will be split between councils, how we propose to use our allocation, and how we use the allocation remaining money from the Child Poverty Fund. Are people happy with all of those recommendations? Anybody any problems with that? No. Thank you very much. Any other business? I'm not aware of any. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you to officers for the reports and for your time this evening. Thank you.